Cool.
And let's go.
All right, let's kick things off then. Thank you so much, Terina. So I've got a very extremely controversial title for a slide, and I'm hoping to sort of get people agitated before we even start, and that's the reason the title it is what it is. And if not anything else, I hope you got curious, and hopefully, I'm happy for you to come in almost confrontational, saying that, oh, like you're going to solve it all for us. But I guess to contextualize that, this is the landscape I'm expecting right now. So this is what I think is the world view, in a sense that we're all diverse folks, just like we're on this call, maybe nationality, maybe personality. In any case, each of us, fit in somewhere, bits and pieces of all of it. And I think that is a fundamental building block of this as well. So there's a nuance in this slide, which I guess hopefully later on you'll pick up. But if you've not got the theme already, this is going to be very much a comic book theme, because I like that a lot and it's accessible to me. And if you guys have not done the pre-read, aka Kung Fu Panda, you might miss out some out on the key puns which are going to come along the way. But just to check though, has anybody not watched the 3 movies in here? Just so that I can hopefully, break down some of the jokes if there are any. Although that loses the point, I think, but still. Can somebody tell me if they've not watched this, the Kung Fu Panda? Anybody there? Everybody's watched it. Amazing. Then you're going to enjoy this a lot. Cool. So having established that, I said, and I also appreciate some folks might be here just for the sake of like, I'm literally bored. So that's fine. And I'm keeping them central to my discussion because they are possibly the hardest to unlock and get through to. So they will be central to my discussion in any format. But here we go then. So I'm going to start with what I call the assumption. Okay. So if you think of a random assumption of any person you ask, okay, so tell me about who is a successful person. So they'll give you like, typically the categories will be somebody like an overachiever who have these catalog of amazing things, and they'll be like the fairly average people who by fundamental definition of doing those the things they're doing is average. So think of the standard things like in our current landscape, how to get like absolutely funded stuff, clear all these amazing exams, and you got like 2-3 job offers, and like doing like really deep important projects, international like education, postgrads. And depending on which stage of your life is, you have like absolutely amazing boyfriend, girlfriend, race, religion, across whatever works. And you have all the things you want, and this happily ever after the land far, far away. So this is one side of the spectrum. And then there's the other one, like this you failed all the exams, you never ever seen this. I say FCD from a cultural background, we call first class with distinction. It's like in a classroom, there's always folks who seem to effortlessly get like these 80%, 90% marks, and here you are like slogging your butts out all night, and you like scrape through 50, 60 or whatever. So they are this, that elusive distinction which you may or may not get, and work with shitty salary, shitty boss, or shitty environment, work environment. You get whole lot of rejections from university, and everybody has an opinion about how bad your relationship is, or you should be doing this, shouldn't be doing that, blah, whatever. In generally, you're like unsettled and don't know the future. So fundamental by the landscape of things, this is what one would categorize as well, successful and unsuccessful. This is the current landscape. So this is what I have like used to contextualize. But I suppose one caveat is that this is my world view. So if you have a slightly different view, just jump in and tell me otherwise, or just go with me, I suppose. So coming down to the fundamental, some definitions. So I guess the challenge of this question here is, so what is the problem? So obviously we need to understand the problem to solve the problem. So is it that we are successful to start off with, and then we kind of sort of deteriorate to be unsuccessful, or do we then when we have face unsuccessful like situations in life, we don't have to bounce back? So what exactly is the problem? Because depending on what the problem is, I guess the solution is slightly different. So we got to think about that. So if this is the case, I think the only way I could think of solving this is depend on where you start, right? So depend on where you start, you either start where like you're successful or not. So where do we start? We start when we're a child, because like we're a kid, we somewhere along the way, we grow up, become students, and like, slightly older. And then we try to move into professional and slightly older therefore as well. So the first stage is like we are dependents, and the next stage is we are independent. And then hopefully, the next stage would be like some sort of serious relationship. I say serious because I guess in the current day and age, you need that qualifier because relationship is almost like from the get-go in some fashion. So I say serious, which could lead to potential, serious commitments and the lot. And ideally in this order, again, that also is not a necessity, but ideally anyway. So finally, the route takes you, okay, something wrong. Yeah, finally, the route takes you to being, well, a parent. So that would be interdependent and then finally codependent. So suppose this is the trajectory, right, of our lives. So if you think about it, when you're a child, no matter what you do, you say boo boo baba dada, and it's like an absolute celebration. Everybody's so happy because you said something. So fundamentally, that particular issue is going to be, or that particular event in your life is going to be celebrated no matter what. So by the look of it, going on my previous slide, you start off successful, but then somewhere along the way you wane off and deteriorate into become unsuccessful somewhere. So, and I'm using successful and happy sort of interchangeably, and I'll tell you why going forward. So if I were to ask you in this current spectrum, okay, who are you in all this? Any answers you can probably put in chat or something. I don't know if I have access to that. I'm in a presenter mode, but I guess let's extrapolate here. If anybody wants to openly come off mute and tell me, you can. But you're like, if I say who are you in all this, you're likely to say I'm a student, professional. I'm in a relationship. I'm like husband, wife, boyfriend, whatever. So I guess as far as I'm concerned, I think I have one fundamental issue with that. That answer to that question, who are you in all this? If you say student, professional, is that answer to who you are or what you are? So that's a fundamental question that I tend to grapple with. And in order to understand this information, let's take an exercise or an example. So think of it like something of a close friend or a spouse, a partner or something. What information has that person given you, or what have you received? What information have you received from them to then for you to claim that you know them? So that if you think about it, your own personal exercise, whoever it may be, brother, mother, sister, friend, whatever, what information have you received from them to say that you know them? So we'll unlock that. So I guess you're coming back to my original point. So we start off being successful and we deteriorate to being unsuccessful, which means that something happens during the transition between the dependent and independent phase, wherein we somehow become magically failures or something, whatever. That happens, something happens, and we'll hopefully unlock that. Any questions so far? I've been rambling on. If you have, just jump in. But I suppose I probably park after the next slide because that's where all the reveal comes along, I suppose. Okay, moving on then. Some reason my slide animation is not working. Let's. Okay. So the next bit is the analysis. So now if we have like seen the journey and we see we deteriorate, and I ask this question, right? So when you see a person, like what information have you got? So think of a new person you've met, like a stranger you've come along, okay? And you've met that person. So what is the first thing you see? You see what's in front of you. You see, I guess, their portfolio, their achievements, or whatever that product you come in front. So you see the outcome of that person as they are in front of you. You think slightly further and you start thinking, what action has the person put in to get to the outcome? So suppose in a current StudyFree, like discussions, somebody comes along and says, I've secured a $50,000 scholarship, let's say. So you would be like, oh, that's amazing. He's brilliant or something. And then suppose he tells you that I didn't do anything. My brother wrote all the applications and sent it through, but I got it on my name and I got it. You'll be like, yeah, probably less brilliant then. So that the action of that outcome is just as important. So then suppose you think slightly more detailed and you think, so you'll try and assess what thought process went about in that person's mind to get those actions. Because some people, like I mentioned, those folks who get like easy 80% when their marks and stuff, it's like you kind of don't understand how easily they process things to put those right sets of activities to get the right outcome. So you kind of start to analyze that person to say, what is it that thinking to get, to do the next thing? Or I guess a better way to think about it is like, what would he have done for me to get there? So that's kind of the usual, how do I say, the thought process that goes on. And finally, somewhere along the way, if you think about it further, it's like you can then go away and think about it to say like, here are the folks, what is it that drives them? And then finally, what is it they value? So if this is the hierarchy of that thought process of getting to know an individual, my personal view, and happy to debate this, is that this is the demarcation of who and what. And this fundamental definition is, in my view, very, very important, because I think this transition is what happens. So suppose there's an outcome. Suppose you have an expected outcome. If that matches what drives you and what you value, that's when you see you have a sense of contentment, and that's when you see that you're happy and you feel successful. And what happens in this transition of dependent and independent is that when we are young, we inherently borrow our value system for somebody who we think knows our value system well, typically parents. And I guess I put Joker here too. I don't mean like all parents are horrible and nasty folks, but essentially the people who we think or who loan us their value system are the ones we think are men with plans. As in we somehow inherently believe that they know what they're talking about. So we fundamentally, when we are young, we operate on borrowed value system. We check in with our parents or our superiors or whoever, or your wardens or something. Should I be doing this? Or they'll tell you, no, do this, and then you might be successful. Do this, you'll be better. So in the initial bits of life, you'll actually be loaning out value system from somebody else. And in that transition from dependent to independent, ideally, you should be building these things for your own. But unfortunately, in the current day and age, what happens is that, that external person tends to dominate your drives, and you've never actually had an opportunity to build your own value system. And when that happens, no matter what the outcome is, in order for you to feel contentment, you'll have to go back to this source of your value system in order to validate your outputs, which fundamentally does not deliver that green line which was there earlier. So that's something we should develop to ourselves. And that the fact that we do not have that effective development of that value system of our own is fundamentally that's getting in the way. And I've just gone on a rant so far, but I can tell you that every single individual on this call knows this. And let me prove this to you. So suppose you've got a very bad grade in an exam. So the parent will say, no, how can he just get such bad grades? You'll probably be silent. You'll be like, he's talking about the outcome. Okay. Next level of escalation of that scolding will be like, didn't you study properly? Didn't you do this? What did you do to get this horrible marks or whatever? That will cut us up on the actions. You'll still probably tolerate that. You'll be like, okay, mom, dad are just ranting along the way. We'll fine. So then slightly it escalates further. Like, so what were you thinking? Did you think that studying an hour or 2 hours or a day before exam, you think you would have got this? Do you really think that was effective? That's the best way of doing this? And then that'll be the time you're slowly getting annoyed, but then you still tolerate with it. And then it comes along this, how many times have I told you? You always do this. And that's the time you'll respond. If you notice that the second they move from thought process to your drives, that's the transition from what to who. And the second they touch your who, you will respond and you'll say, that's not it. Depending on your upbringing, you'll either retaliate, you'll go crying, you'll close the door of the room and sulk away, whatever. But that transition is always apparent to all of us who have had any interaction. Think of it in a different level. So you can think of a relationship, for instance. So if it's going to be a discussion when it's how can you do this, but if there is a discussion how can you do this, that's a fight. So that's again a demarcation between what and who. But coming back to my original point, the issue with the current state of the world is that if all the outcome is driven by a person whose value system is borrowed, the key metric of success right now is going to be this: fame, prestige, power, stamp of approval, or better by comparison, which fundamentally is derived from external to you. It has to be in what my favorite author calls second hand. Because if these were to be, if in order for fame and prestige to exist, there needs to be an audience. There needs to be an external entity who you can sense check this and then work it out. So this is, in my view, a fundamental building block of this thought process. I'll stop here and take some questions if anybody has any. Does anybody have any questions? Students? Okay, I'll move on. So next is the obvious bit. So if you do use that as the approach or the the whole like suppose that's a hierarchy of thought process and anything. So in our lives, I personally think that every interaction in the world, whoever you interact with, we take on different roles. We choose those roles and we strive to fulfill the capacity to, capacity of those individual roles to call ourselves successful. So for each role, you'll have a thought process, an action and an outcome. And if that outcome meets the expected accomplishment, then that will be called, success of that role, which then collates back to your original value, which gives you a sense of success and sense of validation, sense of contentment and happiness. So this then adds up to the different roles. The roles can be anything, that everything. It can be a mix and match of so many things, because every role requires a separate set of thought process, separate actions and separate outcomes. But the fundamental important point that I'd like to highlight here is the fact that whenever the outcome is not as expected, the remedy should be to reflect back on the thought process, change the appropriate actions and get the outcome that's expected. That is essential, because I guess now that touches upon another bit of life. So each interaction will have the same sets of things. Any activity, say as an employee or as a student or whatever thing, every single thing has a set of trajectory that to follow. So each unexpected outcome constitutes a what in your life. But the problem is that we tend to associate that with our who, and that is where the problem. So suppose you say, I failed an exam, therefore I'm a failure. My boyfriend dumped me or girlfriend dumped me because I'm bad. Because we fundamentally, any unexpected outcome, instead of going back to the thought process, we link it up to this trajectory, saying that we haven't accomplished, hence this is a failure. So the fact that, that it's never about the who and it's always about the what, that distinction is lost. And that is my personal view, kind of a root cause of people being, I guess, unhappy, depressed and everything. Because if you were to just simply appreciate that it's a matter of what, you can think about a different way of thinking about it, change some actions and you can get the expected outcome. Think about it. It's almost true for anything you can think of. So you failed an exam possibly because you didn't probably put in the right set of effort or right action to get that outcome. You're probably, a partner, or you have a poor relationship because you did something that was not acceptable, or probably didn't do something that was needed possibly. Or you didn't get some job, or you didn't get some application or college application because you just didn't do the right set of, actions that was required to unlock that specific outcome. It's not a representation of who you are. And that's a very important distinction. So as you succeed in each of these roles, you then start collecting this sense of satisfaction. And depending on how many roles you choose to do, you can vary your life like direction up differently. So I'll give you a kind of a context in this. So you might say people have like, a role models and, like Steve Jobs is successful, whatever. So he has succeeded in one of those roles. Whether you want just that role or do you want to take on other roles in your life is something you'll have to decide for yourself. But the fact that you say that he has achieved, or one individual somewhere has succeeded in one role, doesn't necessarily become a metric for your personal accomplishment, because your value system might lead you to choose different roles in your life. Because again, if you've seen some of those crazy posts out there, you'll also see those, Steve Jobs died alone and all those posts, you'll probably see that. So that constitutes his, I guess, friends, wherein there is absolutely no accomplishment there because he died alone. He has nobody to talk about. So in this same diagram then, because the fact that he had a really good organization, but really poor personal life, does that make him successful or not? So that's something you're going to have to decide for yourself, because these roles, you have to voluntarily choose them. And then you will have to put the appropriate actions and thought process and actions in place to get the expected outcome. And only when you succeed in each of these individual roles you have chosen, will you then be able to say to yourself, look in the mirror and say, I'm successful. Because that is fundamentally where it comes down to. But I guess the nuance here is that the roles doesn't have to be distinct. You can take on, say, for example, you might interact with a person, a friend, for example. It's hard to ring fence just one, because you can play a role of a brother, a partner, a friend, a mother, or a parent to the same person. That's true. Suppose in somebody who has siblings here, let's say, suppose you're the older sibling, Sometimes you have to play the role, like be a mother and be educational, and sometimes you're a friend and have fun along the way, and sometimes say you're really feeling low and you need somebody to take care of you, wherein that person and that your sibling takes the role of your parent, potentially your partner or whatever. So the role is dynamic. It's not necessarily like ring fenced person to person and entity to entity, but the fact remains that depending on which role you are taking on at the time, it has a set trajectory to be mapped out. So I guess that dynamics for each individual is something that you need to figure out for yourself. So I guess this is where we all come down to our original discussion. So this overachiever and average nobody. So this is an open question. I would like to invite you to put in the chat. Which of these two things do you think I am? Could you help me like call out some of the responses, Doreen? I can't necessarily see the chat here. So if you do see does anybody respond? Do you think I am the overachiever or the average nobody?
I think I'm a mixed bag. Few points here, few points there.
So the question was, do you think I am? So I wasn't asking whether you are. I said,
okay,
which of these two do you think I am?
Well, on
I
the
am in the UK,
outside,
I'm an Indian, so I suppose there's a context there if you can pick something up.
yeah, on the outside, I think you would look like an overachiever to most of the people.
True. I think that is what I was trying to bring out. So fundamentally, if somebody who's watched, Kung Fu Panda, and I was talking about the joke, the reality is that all the demarcation is a different stage of my life. So I am fundamentally, this is my life story collated in a slide, essentially. So just the fact that I've basketed somehow on one side and the other on the other side doesn't necessarily, make me one or the other, if that makes sense. And that is a very, very key important distinction for you to understand. So it's like, and the only reason I'm able to bounce out of any of those so-called failures I've identified is the fact that I was able to identify that some actions that I didn't necessarily get me the right outcomes. And I didn't necessarily, have to like reflect that back on me, saying that I am not good enough to complete the task. I am good enough. It's just that I didn't do the good steps that I needed to do. And every one of us tends to behave like this Kung Fu Panda in some ways, because we aspire to be the dragon warrior, looking at like, oh, so they are so awesome. They're so awesome. Like, I guess Tigress, Monkey, Uguay, and the lot. And like, they're this, you aspire to be that awesome person. And if I'm quoting my Kung Fu Panda 3 again, it's like, I've asked myself the question, am I the son of Panda, son of Goose, a teacher, a student? I'm all those things. And that's an important quote from there. And I guess another quote back to you from the same movie is that, I hope each of you appreciate that the fundamental objective of this presentation is that I'm not trying to turn you into me. I'm turning you into you. So that's another quote from the movie that sticks to me. So I guess I'm going to almost summarize this so-called trajectory. Like, I started the question, what does it take to be successful in your life? So obviously you need to look for an answer. So this is my view, the ultimate answer for this. I think what it takes to be successful in your life is first your own definition of success. And you can do that by having a clear understanding and articulation of what you value in your life. Because just because you value taking care of your parents, or just because you value a good professional career, doesn't make you, or does not make you unsuccessful because you've not done something else, if that's what you've chosen. So that's very, very important, because quite often we find people measuring others based on the yardstick they have for themselves. And that is a big pitfall that people normally get into. And the second one is wisdom to know the difference between I failed and I'm a failure. So this is what I meant by what and who. Every single stepping stone that you stumble upon, it's something about what that you strip. If you just manage those whats, you'll be able to conserve your who's. And the time you start understanding that, you'll see what an amazing who you are, because the fundamental person you are is not likely to be bad. It's just that you've been either influenced by a value system which is not your own, or that it's been influenced by I guess priorities that are not ideally conducive to that thought process. But in any case, that's something that I guess each of you need to introspect. But if somebody is like super observant, there have been only 2 slides in the entire deck which were non-cartoon characters. They are essentially the Sherlock and Irene Adler here. And I think that is a subtle undertone which I want to say between thoughts and emotion, although I'm not going to go to the stereotypes of calling man and woman and articulation of thoughts and emotions. But what I mean is there's another layer over and above this that probably warrants a discussion, but potentially a separate presentation in and of itself. But I just put that in there to be sneaky, I suppose. But I'll stop here because I have a couple of other slides, but I think this is the time I'll open this up for folks to ask me a question if there is time for it. There is, isn't it? How much time do you have, Darina?
I think we still have at least 5 minutes.
Cool.
No, sorry, half an hour. Don't worry.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. I powered through because I was going to hopefully open this up to a lot of questions because this is quite a controversial topic and quite dense in a way. So I would welcome questions and actually feel disappointed if nobody had any, but if you don't, then I guess I'll sulk away. Any thoughts, anyone? No, really?
There are a few comments though in the chat.
Let me just pull that up. Yeah. I can't see. Can you read out the question, please, Rina? Is there anything like I failed in all the daily activities? I had rather put in a continuous process for better result. Can whoever asked this question, can you just come off mute and ask what that context is? I'm sorry, I missed that point. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Hi.
Hi, go for it.
It's Ernest.
Hi, Ernest.
Hi. I was asking, in our daily activities, I don't like putting it as when we try a project, we said that we failed, but rather I had put it as we are continuously progressing towards achieving something. The term failed really.
So I say failed is anything that's an outcome that is not expected is fundamentally a failed outcome. If you're looking at an objective definition of it, but that's a key distinction. Many of those so-called non-failures is work in progress because you are then continuously running that loop of looking back and making small corrections and amendments to get that expected outcome.
Sure.
So I guess I'm using the failed as a qualifier here because to bring out the nuances, I failed and I'm a failure. I think the reason I put that word is to bring that differentiation more than branding some, any unexpected outcome as a failure, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Any question? Oh, I can see student professional. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back now. I can imagine this being a bit dense, so please, do jump in and ask questions because I would rather I power to the slides so that I actually have half hour to ask the questions because I could make it all like more mysterious and sulky about it and take up all the 40 minutes. But
Can I ask you something?
go for it.
So basically, it is an awesome presentation. I really loved it. And I could actually relate to almost like every point that you said, although consciously I might not have thought about it, but because of your presentation, it came into the thing. So it's awesome that we should have our own milestones about definitions of success, being successful and not. But how do you cope up with the peer pressure that gets onto us? And, even though probably I'm being confident about myself or the things that are in the things that I do, but there would be always a pressure from outside saying that you're not enough most of the time. How do you cope through that?
So my view to that is fundamentally, I'll reflect back to this, or let's go back to the original thought process. Say, for example, if this is what it is, right? As long as you're able to preserve your core value system and not necessarily take any external inputs that you've received that you fundamentally disagree with as reality, I think you'll be safe. Because it's about conformity, isn't it? End of the day, you are here and it's like almost a mathematical equation. just because 10 people say you're wrong and you're the only one person who says that you're right, if you are saying 2 plus 2 is 4 and the rest of them say it's 9, the volume doesn't make it true. And that fundamental, principle is something that you need to hold on. That's what I meant by take time to build these values. Some people, it takes, the transition between a teenage to an adult. Sometimes it takes 30, 40 years. Sometimes it just comes about like, a few years after retirement, you reflect in your life, you're like, how shallow is my life? And it can be different stages for everyone. But fundamentally, if you have, or you develop the capacity to hold on to what you think is true, we have the integrity to keep it honest. Because deep down, you know your reality. You can't, somewhere and you've not put in the right effort. You know that you've slacked off somewhere. Hold yourself accountable to that. And when somebody gives you criticism, which is fair, take it on board, put in the right thought process and put the right actions to make them right. And then you'll feel better about it. But the fact remains that a person's criticism needs to be weighed against your value system, your yardstick, and not theirs. And if you come short by your yardstick, put in the appropriate measures and change. If you come out, if you find that you're based on your own value system, that person's input is useless, regardless of how many times he says it, is redundant.
Got it. Thank you.
And I guess the challenge and the nuance comes in wherein if that the person in front is somebody you value. Somebody, because then it becomes slightly more complicated. In that case, you can put in some effort to articulate what you value, and hopefully they have similar, chain of thought to understand where you are coming from. But if they fail, I still think from your own personal well-being perspective, you're better off just saying that this is what I value. If you understand it, you'll appreciate it. If not, I don't hold it against you, because you have your yardstick and I have mine. I appreciate that. So I guess the only outcome you can say is let's agree to disagree.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I see a few compliments, but I would be keen to understand which of it what aspect of it did you like? I think there's some, if I can, would I be putting people in the spot if I call them out? I mean, thanks for the compliment, but I don't want to like put you in an awkward spot for having given me a compliment, but I would love it if you, because this is purely out of my own personal introspection and thought process. So it's not to say that I've picked this up from some book. So I guess that brings me very much to my next slide, which like is, this is, I guess everybody has different route to getting to this, understanding this. I guess what I mean to say is that I approach this through my success, my failures. Some people read a lot of books, some people read movies. I've captured different books here, and I'm an Indian, so you'll see a couple of Indian authors there as well. But I think I have been, I guess, broad enough to cover, I guess, diversity aspect of things. But each of us have different flavors to it. Some people like philosophy, some fiction, some spiritual humor. And if you see, there's Bill Watterson, the Calvin and Hobbes is a very prominent feature in my slides, because I think that artist does a very brilliant, stellar job of capturing such deep subtleties in life in such a casual manner that it staggers me. I guess it's up to you, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. So if you might find your insights whatever you look into. So there is no like a secret ingredient out there, like somebody can hand over to you saying that, voila, here's you've unlocked this right now. So there are different routes to it. I guess this is a book version of the diversity. I'm sure if I spend some time, I can find similar genre specific movies as well, because you can search for them. So, yep. And then this is what I would like to leave you with, if not anything else. So this is actually almost phrased as a riddle, if you think. Education is an admirable thing, but it is well to remember from time to time that nothing that's worth knowing can be taught. So what this means is that whatever's that's worth knowing is actually meant to be learned. Because I guess I'm bringing this out, although I wouldn't have loved to, because that's a nuance. If you didn't pick up, is worth picking up, is all I'm saying. So the thing is, if I've known many people who are in wait of the right teacher, right mentor, right guide, right role model, I think it has nothing to do with the external bits. It's all about you. If you are ready to learn something, you would and you will. So that is one of the interpretations of when the student is ready, the teacher shall appear. It's like, because the source of your learning is always out there somewhere. The second you get the right gears in your mind, you just magically learn it. Are there no questions really? I am absolutely staggered by that. I'm slightly disappointed, but yeah, let's park my disappointment to the side. If that's okay, I'd rather see all you folks because right now I'm on. Let's stop staring first of all. How do I do that? And then hopefully I'll be able to see you guys and talk to you and all that. Really, Zoom's person controls. Where are the controls now? Okay, I'm waiting for questions. By the way, I'll keep fidgeting in the background. So go on. Stop share. There we go. Gotcha. How many do we have in call? 22 folks, and not one question. Oh my God.
I'm gonna ask the question then.
Yes, please, Stacey. Thank you for breaking the ice.
Of course. So how can you maybe give us a plan, like step 1 to 3, how to be successful? Like the takeaway from this?
I would say, going back to my, I guess, in a way that defeats the purpose of this whole presentation. It's not for me to prescribe the steps to you. It's for you to introspect and think what it is that you value in your life and then translate that to your milestones in your life. So I guess the first step is to just introspect and see what is it that you genuinely value, and whether that's your own value system that you're using, or just because somebody told you, or that because it gets you some second-hand mileage that you think is of value to you. Because I guess in the current day and age, wherein number of clicks, number of likes, or number of shares is one of the metrics to assess your personal worth, just stand a moment and think, is that what actually you value in your life? So I guess that will be the first and only step that you need to perform. And if you do that step, and I think everything else will be a natural progression, because humans, I think we are programmed to live happy, because we always aspire and strive to do that. It's just that we don't know where to find it. Does that make sense? I hope I didn't offend you, Stacey.
No, of course you didn't. As usually, there's no simple way, and we gotta work.
It's surprisingly easy. I think the challenge is being honest. So the exercise in and of itself is not too hard. You just look about yourself, go down and take a piece of paper. What do you value? I guess the distinction is that, what drives you, what values you, and all that. It takes some time to distinguish each of those stages I put in my slide, but fundamentally, what you value. It's about that sense of naked acknowledgement, wherein you're not, I guess, not ashamed or not hiding behind whatever it is that you value. That's a key important nuance here. This touches upon so many things, right? You think I've put this on a personal level. You can extrapolate this to a much wider scene. Think about like racism or current state of the world. Because just because some horrible people are doing something horrible to somebody else, you can't necessarily make that as a qualifier for an extrapolation, isn't it? It's like, you can think about it. Anybody who's either from the LGBT community, who are like closeted, for instance, they would always look to themselves and saying that, am I horrible or whatever. If you value that, that's you as an individual. And just because somebody is racist to you, let's say, it's not to say all white folks are racist. It's not to say all, I guess, British or Russians or US folks are racist. It's just that you've met one person who has a really shitty value system. And the fact that, we extrapolate things, the same fundamental thing you extrapolate to everything else, is collectively what is getting in the way. If I treat any of you different because somebody else did something, how is that fair on any of you? So that sense of integrity is essentially going to keep you, I guess, protected and insulated. Because, I guess I don't want to get political here, but just because my government did something, if I have to put my head down because some people just incidentally think that is me doing it, I disagree with that.
Yep, sounds about right.
I mean, they're like, I guess, overly controversial topic, and certainly not for, I guess, I mean, I don't have an objection to bring it out in the open, but it is obviously, unnecessarily political and it can get out of hand soon. But I guess fundamentally, I respond from who to who. If I see that you are a good person, if I say that you're a good person, I think you have good value system, and I'll respect that. And if I say that I don't like a person, I'll probably see that, you clearly are feeding off all the inputs from somebody else. And if you only get mileage because they like you, you've got compliments from them, I'll probably respect you a little less. But that's my personal opinion. Maybe there is another person elsewhere who likes it and might get respect out of that. Good for them, I suppose.
Yeah.
I saw a comment by, I think, I'm going to call people out and deal with it, I suppose. I saw a comment from Khushi, if I'm not mistaken, who said this is, I think, very spot on or something like that. Which part of that? Because I didn't see which moment that comment came on.
Hi, actually, I felt right the comment that you were talking about the values part of something when you discuss with your parents and they influence the way we think and they tell us like you should go that way, and we just suppress our thought process or something. I commented on that part.
Thank you. I guess that now good that you brought it up. I guess one important nuance here is it's the fact that you have your value system doesn't make the other person villain right away. I think it's just very important to acknowledge that they have theirs, their life experience have given them that importance or that key input. So just because you have a different value system than your parent, it doesn't mean that they are your antagonist, they're antagonizing you or you are antagonizing them. There is merit in recognizing that everybody is entitled to their own value system, just like you are. Because the reason I bring that out is typically from an Indian upbringing or possibly any overly cultural upbringing, parents have a very important or a strong say in what we become and how we take shape in our lives. But that's what their life has taught them. So somewhere along the way, if you have enough intelligence to determine your own value system, you can respectfully just deviate from that. You don't have to be disrespectful to them. That's something I personally think is I guess learned along the way, but just one point to add to that. Yep. Thanks for that, Kushis. Hopefully I didn't put you on a spot.
No, it was like I really want to admire. I have never been to such presentation before, and it was so helpful that you presented such deep thoughts in such an easy language for all of us to understand. Like it was really, really helpful. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted it helped you, and happy that it's of value to you, I suppose. Pun intended, but yeah. Anybody else have a question? I mean, I would encourage it no matter what. If I don't, unless you are in a place where you can't answer a question, I mean, I can't raise a question, I would say feel free to ask if you have any. I guess I wouldn't be offended by, I guess, language or if you disagree with me or anything, but it still, I think, is a healthy conversation to have. No? Okay, in that case, I can't ramble on anymore, I suppose.
I think everyone is just too deep in their thoughts, like processing the information they got. Don't take it personal, please.
Oh, no, I'm not. It's just that, I am here, and even if you can think out loud and we can continue that conversation as it is what I would have thought. But I can respect the fact that you guys need some time to process this because, yeah, just like I think Kushi mentioned, it is presented oversimplistically, but it's not as, it can be super dense. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so are you going to share with us the presentation? Can we get it afterwards?
You want me to? Because it's very personal and I've taken it's taken me a good 3 years to make it. But if you think it's of use, I'm happy to do that because end of the day, the value of a book is only if somebody can read it. So I guess it's the same thing here. So
then I have another question. We did record the meeting.
Yeah.
Is it okay to share it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
I have no objection. It's just that it's personal. See, the thing about slides is that, the thing about the recording is that it's delivered the way I had it in my mind. The thing about me sharing slide is it can be reworked in a way that you wanted. I don't have an objection to that, but I'd rather you start with your own clean slate rather than use my thought process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for confirming on this. All right, so one last time, any questions or thoughts on this? Need to have a comment.
Can I give you guys a task then? On a range of 1 to 10, 10 being most useful, 1 being least. Could you rate this, please?
Yeah, the scale is too short to rate this presentation.
No, you scale it down then. I'm just saying, bring it down to the whatever like metric you have in your mind.
Actually, it is 10 plus.
Oh, thank you. And the rest? You can put in the comments if you don't want to answer.
Just changed my whole thought process, which was like just before this, I joined this presentation, and afterwards is just like my mind is just roaming around there. What I have been doing all this time, and what I was thinking, and depending on others doing like my things for me, and now I feel confident enough that I am like I'm failed, but I'm not a failure. So
Oh, yeah,
that's the main
brilliant.
point. So thank you so much again.
You're most welcome. Thanks for that.
Can I just add something? I mean,
Yeah, please.
since
I'm dying to get people engaged, so feel free to jump in uninvited.
well, I mean, I don't know if I would be contributing a lot to this, but it was just a thought that was going on since not a lot of people are asking questions. I think that it's definitely a deep topic, and the audience that we are targeting are quite young. And I think like these questions and the main subject of the topic and everything, probably people start realizing and facing a lot of challenges when they grow a little bit more older.
Can I just stop you there, Priya? I think I disagree with that, because if you are old enough to feel bad about yourself and feel horrible, I think you're old enough to understand this.
No, that's totally true. I don't disagree with it at all. But, you know, coming from an Indian cultural background, I think I was made to feel bad right from the day when I was born, actually.
Yeah. So there was a question here. It says, you know, it's simple but bothers me. You know, how can you stop being afraid of making mistakes? See, we are afraid because we reflect those mistakes onto our personality, on our individuality, on our who. But the second you understand that you are trying to get certain outcome out of this activity, and if you can just tweak your thought process and action to get the outcome, that fear will go away, because that fear is essentially protecting yourself from feeling hurt, and you feel hurt when you reflected back on yourself as a personality. It says Zoom user, so I don't know who asked this question, but does that answer your question? For instance, being afraid to choose the wrong path in your life. So what is the worst outcome of choosing the wrong path, and who determines it's right or wrong path? Because the determination of right and wrong is up to you to determine whether, you know, when you say you have a success qualifier, whether, you know, the fact that you secure this amount of money, or you get a job or whatever, but something else will always happen. Because I, for example, I applied to Germany and I applied to the 40 odd university. I got none of them. I got one. And then I got a message from the HOD saying that, you know, we're canceling the course. So then I felt horrible. I'm like, so I then had to pick up a university as my plan B, which is in the UK, which costed me like half my 4 years life worth of saving. So was that the right path for me? I don't know. I took a chance, but now I am here. I think I'm fairly successful by my own definition. But what I mean is, a negative outcome doesn't necessarily mean that it is the end, because it just may not be what you had anticipated. But you can always improvise and make that your new baseline and new expected, like, you know, comfort zone. That's also an option for you. Sorry, coming back to your point, Priya, I think it is dense and it is deep. I agree. But I think the starting point of this thought process should ideally be when you start receiving somebody else telling you that you've done right or done wrong, and you still feel bad or good about it. Bad or good, by the way.
Yeah.
Because if somebody says you've done exceptionally well and you feel so good about it, which clearly tells me that you value their compliment, which by extension would mean that you value their criticism as well.
No, yeah, absolutely. But sometimes, you know, when we look at the real life, it's just, and I sometimes feel that even at my age, like I feel like I can't really distinguish anymore what is being said, like if it's in like a really good way or not. I don't know how to put it in proper words, but uh, yeah, I think I'm just going to shut up because I don't really know what to speak out properly to convey what's going on in my mind, really.
I think there's a fair amount to unpack in that, but I guess
Yeah, there's lot, like, so we were just saying this is a really, really deep topic, and there's a lot of things to discuss. I mean, we could like branch out stuff and talk about it individually, and putting everything into a single presentation trying to talk about it is it's quite tough. And I think people are still trying to actually digest and retrospect their lives and check how they could have done things differently, or maybe in future it might be very helpful for them to actually keep in mind the points that you mentioned. So
I think one important bit is I guess, which I didn't necessarily cover, is generalization.
yeah,
I think that's another risk we tend to run. So it's like one person says they all will think, or you've done like, you've taken one wrong decision in your life, like you sort of you retrospectively contaminate all the good stuff you have in your life. It's
but
usually, I mean, it's most obvious in I guess in a relationship. Like you've had a bad breakup and you question every single good like day you had with the partner. Is like, it's like, did they not love me at all? Like, and that it's most apparent there. But I guess what I mean is that extrapolation is unnecessary and should not be done.
that's true. And I think partly the reason is also the conditioning that we've been through. So it's basically a vicious cycle because it's going on from generations to generation and being passed on to us. So unless and until we identify the triggers and like stop there, we would be continuing the cycle and passing on to the future generations as well. So we need to condition ourselves and not get into the societal pressure and give it like pressurize ourselves into like unnecessary situations. So just do what you do, what you like, and be the judge for yourself and don't let others be.
There are two questions. One is from Aryan, who says we have to live in a society and you ask help and they don't offer help. This comes down to the way you disagree with someone. You can say, I disagree with you, fuck off. Or you can say, I'm sorry, I just don't agree with you. And I don't see why you say this or why you can't see my view, but this. Or you can just remain silent and let them rant and you just remain yourself. So this is a qualifier based on how you maintain that equilibrium. Because it's not always necessary to prove or to tell somebody that you think you're right and they're wrong. You can just go away assuming like, okay, that's what they think. I don't agree with that, but up to them. In which case they will continue believing that either you agree with them or whatever, but that's up to them, isn't it? So you don't necessarily have to antagonize every single person you disagree with. And that's I guess what I meant. I mentioned this to Priya. I think the only outcome you can have is let's agree to disagree. It's like my mom used to tell me, I mean, a really wonderful story. It's like there were two blind folks who went to an elephant, and one touched the foot and one touched the ear. And one said elephant is like a tree trunk. Another one said elephant is like a mat. So it's not to say anybody is wrong here. It's just that that's the perception, that's the view of the world they had. So somebody who's seen the whole elephant, do they agree, disagree? Do they go to educate them? What do? They can just say, yeah, from your perspective, you're right. Thank you so much. And that is just, you're effectively disagreeing, but politely. And that is, I think, the way you can so-called exist in the society, because you don't have to establish that you're right or wrong. That's not the need of the day. You just need to know it. I guess now I'm quoting Matrix, but yeah, anyway. Sorry, there's another question from Honest. There is a question of the mighty and their thoughts. You might have a better idea, but their influence keeps you under wraps. How can you bypass one of these? I suppose, I guess when you're young, and I guess you can't always supersede a headmaster or something, but you can still know fundamentally that you were right. And that knowledge can keep you empowered, because somewhere along the way you will come to a spot wherein you can supersede their control over you. Because when you say might, unless you're physically locked up in a room, if you're talking about intellectual might, I don't think it has anything to do with age. Because I have a 3-year-old daughter and she's bested me in so many ways I can't tell you. And I'm like, what, 37 now? And I'm like, does that mean, who is mighty now? And I always gave in, and if she wants something, she gets it from me. So who is intellectually superior here? So the question of the might is, it comes down to essentially you allowing yourself to believe that you're right in spite of that person who you think is more powerful than you believes differently. Does that answer your question, Anish? I guess I'm oversimplifying things in some way, but I can't. I asked this in the context of studying abroad regarding the current situation, and mostly say that now it's of no use. Wars are going on in the smart city and the native one situation. See, the fact that wars are waging and that the risk is not how do I say, not an untrue statement. Have you weighed that out? Does your value system supersede the current risk to your life and your current surrounding more than, supersede the value of getting that the education abroad is a question? Because now this actually puts, I guess, puts you in a bad light, in the sense that you actually clearly articulated to me that the original problem you stated to me and the actual situation are slightly different. It's not a question of society. It's just a question of what you prioritize more. Somebody has told you that there's war, you need to be careful. That's one input. Then there is an issue of you going abroad and studying. So which do you value more? If you value one over the other, you go with what you value. You may not have the maturity to understand the far-fetching impacts of the war and what consequence it might have to you. That if you have confidence in the person who's giving you this input, you can give them that weightage to say, maybe I don't understand things enough, I need to factor that in. But having said that, it still comes down to you deciding what you value more. Do you understand? I do understand. End of the day, I guess you are young and parents can just slap your face and say, go to your room, which comes back to, I guess, Ernest's point of physical might, and you have to set your trap and sit at the time. But you can continue to believe that, going abroad is important. Maybe you can try it the year after. Yeah, the information who disagree with you doesn't have to be neighbor, society. Like I mentioned, you can be a sole contender and everybody disagree with you. It's like if I've grown in a co-education school and I go to a complete girls' school and I say, I tap on somebody's shoulder, I might get booted out of that place there because that's not the decorum of the place. It doesn't make me wrong. It's just that's not what is expectable or acceptable norm of the place. You take that on board and live with it. So I guess it comes down to the independence and freedom you allow for your own, I guess, thoughts to flourish. Because the amount of power we attribute to others' opinion is directly proportional to, I guess I'm too much of an engineer. I guess the amount of the influence other people have on you is directly reflective on how much you value your own judgment. You might want to take a step back and saying that, is that person, I guess one other way of looking at it is that person's intent appropriate? Because normally your well-wishers have your best interest in mind when they're stopping you from doing something. So can you then give an additional weightage to something that you may not be, or might be too young to understand? That you can factor in. But I definitely would not take on critical feedback from neighborhood and a lot, because they don't know me. Just because, I guess I'm assuming you're Indian, considering your name is Aryan Gupta. So like somebody says, Sharma ji ke bete, or that fellow's son did this, and all the lot. Like he might have done hundreds of things, he might not have done hundreds of things. So how does that change your life? It's like I can't give a good metaphor. I suppose it's like we have this there's an English saying called cow's opinion. When two men are talking, apparently far off in the field, cow goes moo. What happens? Nothing. Cow just goes moo because the people continue talking. And that's what I'm talking about here. Because somebody has an opinion, that doesn't change the dynamic of what your life is. But if it's another person out there standing in the field saying that I disagree with you, you can listen to them like, yeah, okay, that person is of value to me, and give your attention to them. Or to saying that, yeah, he's the guy who's screaming in the background, and let them be. I don't know what that emoji means. I don't belong to this generation, Aryan. Sorry.
Can I add something here to Aryan?
Go for it.
So I sort of like relate to from where you're coming, Aryan, because as an Indian, as a fellow Indian, I think we have all been conditioned to accept whatever our elders are saying to us. And we were thrashed if we backtalked to them or did not agree with them, although the fact that probably they might be wrong sometimes. And if we didn't agree to them, we were perceived in a bad light. So I think that's the mindset that you are also having. Even I also had that until I was at home and until I was dependent on my parents. But once you come outside and you start living life for yourself, and you actually start to live as a person that you are, and not dependent on others, because as Avinash was showing in his one of the slides, that we're sort of dependent on our parents or like neighborhood or like whatever, but their role stops at a certain point when we actually start growing up for ourselves, because they can't wear our shoes and like feel what we are feeling or think whatever we are thinking. So it wouldn't absolutely make any sense for them to contribute anything. And if you're
go for sorry, I didn't hear you speak.
And if you're actually thinking about funds to go to abroad university, I mean, I don't know if apart from your parents or maybe the close relatives, like the society is not going to fund you to go abroad. And I think the expectation of others funding them shouldn't be existing in the first place. I think go like try on your own, get a scholarship or like do whatever. And it doesn't have to do anything with metropolitan cities or like coming from rural places. It's about you,
I
what
have
you
a point
think
that
about.
I need to add here. One moment.
Yeah, go on.
I think before we go down that tilt, there's one pitfall in this analysis, which I think is becoming apparent from the conversation, is this is not a question of right, wrong. It's a question of evolving your value system and holding on to something that you have a conviction of it being true. Because somewhere along the way, it comes on you to evolve your value system to your surrounding based on your inputs. Because some of those inputs may actually be helpful in shaping your personality because it might actually be true. So just because you value something, and somebody gives an input, it's not necessary to disregard that. It's not about right and wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to have wrong value system, because that loop needs to exist. Because if you inherently have the conviction that whatever you say is absolutely right, you're a frozen person. You're not going to evolve, and that's fundamentally going to get you stuck again anyway, isn't it? So you need to have a way or a method to sort of iterate in this that's what I meant by integrity. If you are going to be standing firm in the face of adversity in the society and a lot, you'll need to have that much commitment, that much confidence in your assessment of your values to hold on to it. If it's not robust enough, then it needs to change. So that is something you'll also have to factor in. But I'm just on a rant right now, and I realize I'm 3 minutes over time. Stacey, how are we on time? Do we need to shut it down?
We can keep talking. Technically, I can stop recording. I'm not gonna stop you.
Oh no, it's just that